I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and wellbeing. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morena everyone, happy 2022. We are into a new year and hopefully for everyone, a better one than 2021 was. My name is Mikki, you're listening to Mikkipedia, and I am so excited to bring to you today the conversation that I had with Dr Gabrielle Lyon. Dr Gabrielle Lyon is an integrative physician who completed her fellowship in nutritional sciences and geriatrics at Washington University, St. Louis. She's a board certified in family medicine and completed her undergraduate work in human nutrition, vitamin and mineral metabolism. And you might have heard me talk in my interview with Professor Don Layman that I was having a conversation with Dr. Lyon in that podcast episode because Professor Don Layman was Dr. Lyon's supervisor as she went through her postgraduate degree in nutritional sciences. So she is an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to optimal health, longevity and performance, and she works closely with current and retired special operations military operators as part of the Task Force Dagger Foundation. In this interview with Dr. Lyon, we talked less about protein than I thought we would actually, and we in fact pivoted our conversation to talk about how you can take ownership of your health and health leadership. And I found it such a good conversation because it was directly in line with what Dr. Lyon is currently super interested and passionate in. And all you have to do is follow her on social media to see just some of the information that she is sharing with us. Before we kick off into the interview, I'd just like to remind you that Monday's Matter is going to kick off mid-January, January 18th to be exact. So we'll put links in the show notes as to how to sign up to that. It's an 8-week fat loss plan utilizing protein-sparing modified fast in that group support setting that incorporates a host of other things that allow you to meet your body composition goals in a way that is sustainable, realistic, and doesn't leave you feeling deprived and depressed because you're on a diet. This is my signature program, and I'm super excited to launch the summer edition in mid-January. But in order to get yourself organized, sign up now. All right, team, please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. Dr. Lyon, thank you so much for taking the time this evening to chat to me. I really appreciate it. And, one of the things I've noticed when I'm following you on social media and heard you talk on your YouTube channel, but also in other podcasts, is you're unapologetic and unwavering in your focus with protein, with muscle health, and the importance of this with longevity, which is quite, that message is not at odds, but it is a sort of opposing other people who are interested in longevity, which I definitely want to chat to you about.
Great.
But one of the first things I want to ask you is, can you share with us a little bit of your background as to how you got into nutrition and also, I suppose, your passion for this area? And I know that you've chatted before, I think on another podcast, about your grandmother and how she was an influence on you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to be able to share that with you. I would say that growing up, healthy ways of living were always a bit on the forefront. For example, there was no one in my family was overweight. My grandmother was really into fitness. Back in that day, that was maybe even before Jane Fonda, right? And she was really into a lot of cardio, but just very active. And it defined her. People thought she was weird. She would bring peanut butter with her all over the place. And it's interesting in retrospect, if she had known what I think that we know now, she probably would have even been in better shape. But you asked me kind of where the inspiration came from. And I graduated high school early. I graduated in 3.5 years, and I moved to Hawaii And I moved in with my godmother, who actually is a PhD in nutritional sciences.
Your godmother.
Yeah.
I said grandmother. Yes. Okay.
No,
yeah.
but my grandmother was very, very interested in health and wellness and fitness. And listen, my father was a collegiate wrestler. He was captain of the wrestling team at Penn. In order to do that, you obviously have to be pretty fit. I moved in with my godmother, and she is and was really ahead of her time. She was looking at food as medicine in a very functional root cause capacity. And it changed everything. It changed everything for me. I was so deeply inspired that at 17, I knew that that was going to be the path I was going to take.
Yeah. And what is your sort of educational kind of background there, Gabrielle?
So I did my undergraduate in human nutrition, vitamin mineral metabolism, and I did that at University of Illinois with Dr. Donald Lehman. He was a mentor very early on. Then I went to medical school. Following medical school, I did 2 years of psychiatry training, worked as a psychiatrist for a year, then did 3 years of family medicine, then did 2 more years as a postdoc in nutritional sciences, obesity medicine, and geriatrics.
And what was it in your sort of postdoc? Was that the platform with which you now have your practice and your messaging and things like that? Like, what did you see in that postdoc?
Yeah, that also is another good question. I think that after all those years of education, going on to, and you're a PhD, so you understand that going into academia is a different experience. Really, there's the clinical knowledge, and then academia is in and of itself its own unique bird. And it synthesizes things. And I was doing clinical research, and it was during that time where I was seeing, we were looking at we were doing interventional studies. And I remember just looking at the women, and one woman in particular, and looking at her brain, right? So we imaged her brain, fMRI. And she'd always struggled with her weight. And I was doing Alzheimer's and cognitive research at the time, as it also relates to body weight. And just looking at her brain, thinking, man, in the next 10 to 20 years, she wasn't probably going to struggle to remember her kid's name. It's plural. She was a mom of 3. And I realized that we were failing people so desperately. And that was a light bulb moment for me, really.
Yeah. And so from there, Gabrielle, you obviously you see patients, you've got like a thriving clinic, but in addition to that, you're very active on social and you give a lot of your time on social, putting forth your messages in and around that muscle health and protein. And it feels like it's such a contentious topic. Like you wouldn't think that it would be, but my goodness, like
it's really interesting because when I was doing it, it never was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It blows my mind that this is for some reason so controversial.
Yeah.
And, we can all agree that nutritional science is an evolving field. We can agree that metabolism is highly complex and that there are independent variables that we're now just starting to understand.
Yeah.
That being said, certain fundamental concepts don't change.
Yeah.
The quality of protein, the digestibility of protein, the need for aging muscle, whether the gut microbiome can generate amino acids on its own or whether we need essential amino acids, regardless of the way in which we get it. Biologically, from what we understand to the best of our knowledge now, there are truths in science that are repeated. And as you know, that if something is correct in its hypothesis or shows promise, it's repeatable, right? It's not some nebulous thing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how controversial protein is. And listen, it's so funny. There are aspects of it where I actually get tired of talking about it. Yeah. Can you imagine? I talk about it all the time. Yeah. But if I don't, right? So if I choose to not continue to educate and continue to speak out about it, then I'd be shying away from a responsibility that I have.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. I had this conversation with a friend of mine who also is a PhD, and he spends his time in the exercise field just helping people be more active, but in a really practical way. And I remember him saying to me that as a PhD, you have a responsibility, that you do have this knowledge and you have that passion. And this is a gift that you need to sort of share with people, because even if you feel like you are repeating yourself, that there will be people who are being bored by your message and the rest of it, there will always be a person that you will reach that you may not have reached with that particular post or that particular comment or, that kind of thing. And I feel that with your messaging as well, Dr. Lyon, it is.
I mean, it is. It's, at some point, I really truthfully don't want to discuss protein anymore, but I have to because of just so much misinformation out there. And also, just as you had mentioned earlier, this concept of longevity.
Yeah.
If we were to listen to what the common narrative is, the narrative would be eat less protein, that affects longevity. And that is a really skewed way of looking at things, right? And now this is where my wheelhouse of training is. I am a trained geriatrician. For those of people who don't know what a geriatrician is, it's specializing in individuals in the later part of their life, 65 and up. It truly is end of life and older adults. And when you think about that, the narrative right now for individuals who don't deal with the aging population, these are physicians or bloggers or influencers that really haven't been in that arena of aging, because when you've been in the arena of aging, you are never going to say, hey, why don't we decrease your high quality protein? That's really going to change the longevity and trajectory of your life. Because if you think about it, at the end of life, okay, so let's say you decide to go vegan or vegetarian and your bone density is lower, your muscle mass is lower, and you've crippled yourself, but you live from 90 to 95 with full assistance, possibly bed rest, not ambulatory. Yeah. Okay, so that's one choice. Or you live till 90, totally on your own, completely vibrant and still working out and having no indications or challenges with your activities of daily living. How would someone want to age?
Yeah. So on that and on the idea, like you say, gosh, you've talked about protein so much and it's almost getting to that point where you're just, sick of it. What is it that you are interested and passionate about talking about, if anything? Is there a particular part of aging which you feel actually needs more attention, that we need to be considering more? Yeah.
I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, but that's a fantastic question. One of the things that I'm very, very interested in is less about, I love metabolism and I love nutrition. I've dedicated my life to it. Yeah. I still talk to Don. Those conversations we have every day. And we just decided, if those people who are listening don't know, I have a YouTube channel in which I put conversations with my mentor. And this is a 20-year relationship with one of the world's best protein scientists. One of the things in over 15 years of clinical practice that I am very passionate about, and this may surprise you, but maybe not, is I'm very interested in human behavior. And I'm extremely interested in human predictability. Yeah. I have a very unique practice in where I service elite members of the military, special operations. It's, I take care of CEOs and very high, and really anybody who is high performing, right? So if you like my message and you like my vibe with that, I know it sounds cheesy, then, you resonate with me. Those are the typical patients that I bring in. But what's so interesting is there are archetypes of people. And it's very predictable how an individual will respond, where their downfalls are, where their strengths are. And if you can leverage that and you leverage that, it takes away you take away any physical limitations. Yeah. And people really do outstanding. So that is something non-science based that is very, very much on my mind.
Well, it's interesting you say it's non-science based, because I've been doing a lot of mindset reading for myself over the last year, just from different avenues and different books. And it's been super beneficial for my my endurance sort of endeavors, but my business mind and things like that. And as I understand it, there's a real base of kind of psychology and science behind, human behavior and sort of what makes people tick and what drives that. You mentioned 4 archetypes, Gabrielle.
Yeah.
Can you share them with us?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's actually more like 10, but that's going to come out in my book.
Okay.
And I would say one of the most common, there's a couple different archetypes that I think are so fascinating as it relates to being able to get the best out of a patient. There is the CEO archetype, probably the one that I get the most. And they're interesting. They push really hard and their pitfalls are very predictable. They like their vices. And those vices are whether it's drugs or alcohol or they're addicted to the rush, right? And the CEO archetype is always in a hurry and they're not really great at following up and executing. If you put it in front of them, you give them their protocol, then they'll do it, but you have to be very much on top of them. The other type of archetype that I think is very important for people who are professionals and understanding is that there is the relationship archetype. And this is fascinating because these are the people that are going to be less likely to tell you how they're really feeling.
Okay.
Because they don't want to, they somehow feel that it will impact the dynamic of the relationship. They are relationship driven.
So they're scared to disappoint you if they share with you something that you're not expecting or in
exactly.
their
or
head.
if they don't feel well. Let's say they don't feel well. So let's say, for example, I put an individual on a hypothyroidism protocol where we're adjusting their medications. And this is a protocol that I think is going to be beneficial. The patient doesn't necessarily feel great. But they don't want to tell me because they don't want to disappoint me. And those are the patients that it becomes very difficult, that they will go to a little length of suffering rather than being forthcoming. And they usually don't really complain. And they're, well, my doctor said to do this, so I'm just going to do it. So that's one. Then there is this one never gets better. This, essentially is the too many cooks in the kitchen. You typically see this. I hate to throw anyone under the bus, but it's more in the celebrity type patient where they have getting advice and opinion from so many different people that they never can execute forward. And they never get better. They never get better.
And you see that sort of just if I'm thinking like just with people in general. And of course my mind goes to a nutrition example here where people are like, oh, I need to lose weight. There's keto, there's carnivore, there's vegan, there's all of the information, not actually putting any of it into real life. Is that what you're sort of thinking into practice?
Yeah, or pieces of it, parts and pieces. Oh, well, I did this. Gabrielle said to do this. I did this. And then I got advice from this person. And then I got advice from this person. Or, they are asking what they think, they ask other healthcare providers of what the protocol is. And, it's just interesting. It's those guys never get better. Hardest to treat. I usually don't take those on. I usually say, listen, if this is how it's going to be, then we're going to, you go work with that person. Then when you're ready, then you come back. The other, let's see, what's the other one? The questioner patient is always interesting. Those are fantastic. My husband is a questioner patient. He will do whatever you tell him, but he has to know why. And he has to understand the mechanism. This is more of the cerebral type. You're probably more of a questioner. And you'll execute, but you have to know why.
Okay. And how, do you, with the patients in clinic and just with people, I suppose, that you deal with sort of every day, do you screen them, Gabrielle? Do you sort of go, sort of know what you're like? And then how does someone respond, I suppose, when you sort of present them with this information? Are people aware in your experience of their sort of personality type or?
I would say no. I think that I think probably one of the best skill sets that I offer patients is listening. It's really interesting. The healthcare system in the US doesn't provide a space where people feel heard. And that really affects, number one, their capacity for optimal health, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training, whether it's whatever it is that they're going through. And I think it also leads to a lot of misdiagnoses because medicine right now has transitioned to become very algorithmic, which I think is very valuable. because of the volume, but it loses its magic and it loses its art. And when you lose the art of medicine, being able to truly help people diminishes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally appreciate that. And we often talk in our, like with my colleagues about the art and science of nutrition. The scientific principles, but actually you need to apply them to the individual in order for them to actually be successful. Because if you don't understand that person and their situation and their personality type, then you could have the perfect diet, but it's not perfect for them, so it will never work.
I had an experience that now in retrospect, I realize why that was possible. I obviously am very protein forward, and my protein recommendations are 1 gram per pound ideal body weight. That is definitely on the higher end, but defendable by science. And I had one patient that was just like, I am not losing weight, I'm gaining weight. And it's very difficult to, number one, overeat protein. And number two, to overeat enough protein to actually put on weight from protein. I mean, certainly it is based on calories in, calories out, the nuances of the equation, which I think is why there's a lot of arguing in our space. There's that calories in versus calories out, and people are saying, well, it's the quality of the calories. And, does any of that matter? I think that is more nuanced as it relates to the gut microbiome, which certainly will come out more, I believe, some of the more recent studies. But so I was sitting in clinic and I was earlier on in my career, and I was just thinking, well, everybody should have this amount of protein, and this is how it should be for everybody. Because the science would say this amount of protein will stimulate muscle, it'll improve glycemic regulation, all this stuff. And she came back and she was heavier. She was like some ridiculous amount, like 7 pounds heavier. And she had put on muscle. She was a hyper-responder to muscle, and she was like miserable. And I will never forget that then she went to a more vegetarian diet and just felt so much better, lost weight. And, you speak to the individuality, and I think that is in part very important. What I think is going to happen is that we're going to begin to learn more about the gut microbiome that we don't know. For example, we do believe that amino acids are essential, and we defined the essential amino acids to be amino acids that we get through the diet, right? That we have to eat them. However, some recent papers are coming out, a collection of a couple, in a few different labs have come out that would indicate that our microbiome can actually generate some of those essential amino acids.
Yeah.
And then in fact, some of those amino acids are absorbed in the colon as opposed to the small intestine.
Amazing.
So there's all these things that while we can understand the core fundamentals, I think things are, it's still changing.
Yeah. And, if I think to your sort of personality types and human behavior stuff. So obviously part of it is us as practitioners recognizing that everyone is different and sort of understanding and allowing for that. Also, you had a post up recently, Gabrielle, about health leadership, and I absolutely loved it because I felt like it was almost the personal responsibility message, but it was a much more empowering way to put it. Because personal responsibility to me almost sounds like blame, like you're blaming an individual for something, whereas health leadership is sort of requesting that people take ownership of their space and them recognizing that they are in fact, the owners of their health, and they can take some control.
Yeah, you can take a lot of control. If we think about leadership as what is leadership? And I think it's really the ability to navigate your own personal direction and intention. Where you can never ask someone to be or do more than you're willing to do. And I think right now in society, it's very victim-based. Oh, well, this just happened to me, or, whatever it is. That's wrong. It's not just personal accountability, but it is, what are you willing to sacrifice? How are you willing to show up in terms of leading from the front, doing that, being the person that you're telling other people to be. And I think that that's very valuable. And what does that mean? Does that mean personally? It does. It also means professionally. I think that there is a professional responsibility in health leadership. For example, one of the reasons I agreed to do this podcast is because I think that you're doing great work and you are leading from the front, and it's important. Yeah. So that's really what I think about in terms of health leadership is transferring the victim kind of weather reporting mentality to showing up and executing.
Yeah. And, do your clients or your patients, do they respond well to that sort of ownership themselves? Or is it a surprise to them that well, probably not for you, because people who come to your clinic will know. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But what do you think in general? Do you think people are ready to sort of recognize their own sort of role?
I really think it's 50-50. I think so I take care of a lot of people that are business oriented and own their own business, more entrepreneurial. And I always am fascinated because so first of all, the success of any business is dependent on the success of the visionary. Yeah. And actually, when you take it one step further, the health of that visionary. How are they feeling? How are they showing up? A business can only go so far. And that common denominator, that kind of linchpin piece is health.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to think about. So when an individual shows up, the question becomes, do they feel like they can do it? Or, are these people surprised when they hear me talk? The way in which I practice medicine, I don't think is for the faint of heart. If you are extremely sensitive and want to blame and want to stay stuck, then you go to somebody else.
Yeah.
But if you're really ready to do the work and just need a physician that is capable and excellent in their field, then that's what, then you come into my practice, right? We have phenomenal physicians first and foremost. Yeah. And then, I think that when individuals really take personal responsibility and leadership, that's actually when you see their businesses and their lives just flourish, because it then comes down even deeper to personal integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're just showing up and they're doing the work in all areas. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Actually, it is multifactorial and it's multidimensional in terms of the area in which they do their work, whether it's time management or money management or their home life, whatever it is, there are these domains that you must execute.
Yeah.
And, when we think about health and nutrition, I would love, and I just don't see this right now, I don't see the interface between the two. What you see out there now is you see good scientists. Of course, you see bad scientists, but you see the nutritional science aspect, which is a hard science. It's not like it's a soft science where it's a pseudoscience. It is a biochemically based science. But you don't see often an interface between the hard science of it and then the aspect of human behavior. You just don't. Many practitioners, and I would love to see, because in clinical practice, it really is the marriage of both.
Yeah.
It has to be. And it's in all those domains. It's not just, I use emotional or health, emotional leadership or health leadership as one piece of it, but it would be very interesting to see more individuals and more health care leaders really talk about the interface.
Yeah, completely. And it's I think about all of the areas that you mentioned affect, obviously, every corner of someone's life, right? And I don't know if I've quite said that right, but there will be what I notice with some people is that there will be an anchor sort of behavior. So it might be that they change one thing with nutrition or their exercise or their sleep, because obviously I'm thinking from a health perspective, or even the stress management. And then that's the thing. And sometimes it's surprising as to what it is. And it might not even be something which I'd even have thought of. And they're like, I did this one thing and then it snowball effect and it impacted on all of these other aspects of my behavior, because you sort of have to, speak to for a lot of people, I find, and I'm not even sure if this is on the same theme as what you're talking about, Gabrielle, but it's you find that one thing, and that's the thing which is then going to sort of transform that person. It might be so different from what we as practitioners might even have imagined.
Yes, I think what you're saying is absolutely true, that, you and I are both very science oriented, and we'll always go to the science first, which makes sense and is extremely comfortable and important. And the other aspects are not just behavioral, but it is about leadership. It is about personal integrity. It is about really, just being and taking control of an individual's health and wellness. And that stems beyond protein and stems beyond nutrition and stems beyond training. It is truly a multidimensional kind of a approach.
Do you know, we did personality types at work this year using the Belbin inventory. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but...
but it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, so you talked about the CEO archetype and how they're very good at sort of getting something off the ground, but not necessarily following through with it. Whereas that reminded me of my Belbin personality of I'm not a very good completer finisher. Like, I will start something, but unless someone is writing me for the deadline or constantly, either I have to do it straight away or I need that sort of follow up.
Totally.
How does your practice change when you sort of discover, the type of person you're working with? So how would you work with someone who might recognize themselves in that CEO archetype or that relationships archetype or...
Well, I think that really being aware of, what the individual is like. For example, some of the CEOs that I have, I just have a very world-renowned trumpeter who I just love. And I'll do everything for them, right? Yeah. I will, okay, where's your assistant? Let me get this test ordered. We're going to have a home blood draw. I just have to orchestrate everything and really be the quarterback. And I'll be like, hey, you just need to show up here at this time. Just go.
Yeah.
And it allows for more effective treatment, right? And I can only take on so many of those of the personality. It's almost like I'm their medicine wife, right?
Yeah.
They've got, one of our friends jokes that he's got his work wife, his other wife, and then his medical wife. It's that kind of a thing. But that would be an example of really caring enough about the patient in front of you to figuring out what they need. Yeah. I had another patient today who's incredibly detail-oriented, perfectionistic by nature. You better believe that her note is going to be completely tailored to her. It's going to be very specific on dates. It's going to be very specific on locations, because that's what she's going to need to essentially, I don't know if it's feel safe, but it's definitely to feel heard.
Yeah.
Whereas a CEO, he's not even going to read his note.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter as much to him. Do you think there's...
It doesn't matter.
So obviously, as I'm hearing it, it would be of value for us to understand our personality types, to sort of get what we need from our medical practitioners or from any sort of practitioner that we work with, maybe. Do you think?
Yes. By understanding the archetype in which you function really will determine the success trajectory of your health and wellness.
Yeah.
I'm probably more of a CEO archetype when it comes to my own health. I don't really care. Just get it done.
Yeah.
But, I also don't need to know the answers. You would think that as a physician, I would want to know, why are you doing this? I don't care. Just tell me what to do. I don't really want to know. I'm busy. I'm good.
Yeah. There seems some crossover with what you're describing and Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies. Yes. She was actually one of the original, that's a great point. She was one of the original books that I read as I started to see these patterns. She was one of the original books that I read, and I was like, wow, I really see these patterns as patients. And then more patterns emerged, and it just became so interesting, but for sure. Yeah. And so, Gabrielle, you mentioned that you've got a book coming out.
Yeah.
So tell me more.
Well, right now, I have a book. It will probably be out in another year. Just takes a long time. And it has components of everything that we're talking about. It has, obviously, muscle is the organ of longevity, and this concept of skeletal muscle as really the most overlooked endpoint for health and wellness, because it is a vital sign and it is incredibly overlooked. Talks about muscle as the organ of longevity and as an endocrine organ, which is so fascinating. And of course, I have a few different protocols for optimizing muscle mass and really optimizing longevity. So it's a protein-forward, protein-centric, muscle-centric book for optimizing longevity. It does have some mindset aspects. It also has some training aspects and recipes, which I'm a terrible cook, but luckily I have a co-cook expert.
Brilliant. That sounds good.
And so that'll come out in a year. It'll be very cool. I'll come back on and talk about it. I think it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I am really excited.
I can imagine. And I also can't imagine this where you're at with it right now, just because as I understand, writing a book it's a big task. It's a big task, particularly in relation to everything else that you've got going on. Can I ask? What
do you mean, like two very little children and a man-child in medical school? Yeah, what are you talking about? And I run a full-time concierge medical practice. Yeah,
you got a lot going on. So do you? What are your thoughts on biological age, Dr. Lyon?
Biological age versus what? Chronological age? Or
yeah, because there's a really big sort of push in that longevity space, looking at these sort of these metabolic biomarkers, like NAD plus and I don't know, cholesterol. I can't think of other things, but sort of and if you really optimize these things, then you're really going to extend your lifespan. And obviously, we spoke of the difference between a 95-year-old with no muscle and a 90-year-old who's buff.
Absolutely. And how do we define extend our lifespan? Are we really designed to live to 120 or whatever? If that was in fact the case, that we were supposed to and designed biologically to live longer, then there probably would be at least one human to have done that, right? It doesn't seems that, aside from the tortoise or whatever it is, there is an endpoint. And I ultimately think people don't want to accept that.
Yeah.
And I think life is very short and we all, it's scary. Nobody wants to end it. And one would love to think about extending a lifespan. I think biological age is a real thing. And I think that, it's interesting. I try not to put limitations on it. My dad said he's going to live to be 150 or whatever. He's 70.
Yeah.
Is that true? Can you do that? There are some people in this space that say they're going to live to that kind of age. I mean, maybe there's things happening we don't even know about.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think?
Well, no, I've been looking at, so of course there's David Sinclair, I think his name is. And
yeah.
But I don't know. I listened to a couple of podcast interviews with him, and I'm not sold on it. And I mean, I'm no expert, but I don't know his reasoning for why he thinks something is the sort of panacea to aging. It didn't quite sort of gel with what I understood.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also believe, and I don't know this, but I think that he talks about low protein, things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we extend life by 2 years for what?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, it just doesn't make sense. And I think that that's where we have to understand that there is a difference between PhD academic research and then clinical practice.
Yeah.
There's just a difference. And I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a mouse model study is going to be different than a human study.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. And in fact, I think I had quite a good conversation with Professor Lehman about, what the difference is between those rodent trials and what we might see in humans and what might not be able to transfer sort of over. Gabrielle, after with all of your, knowledge and what you do and being a health leader yourself, what do you do to, what's your sort of usual daily practice? Do you have a daily routine? People are always so fascinated as I am.
I do. I always work out in the morning. Mm-hmm. I have 2 very little kids, but it doesn't matter. I will always work out. And that workout, I typically am training by 7 a.m. And that has to happen on weekends. people ask me, what do I do for fun? Well, I read research for fun. I think that that's fun. I love to hang out with my kids, and I love to train and travel.
Yeah.
Fun for me is the same as work, right? It would all be, I guess kids are not work, but in that way, I get up, I train. Before I train, I plan my day. So I design my day before it happens.
Nice.
Meaning I decide what's going to happen in the magical world of my mind before anything.
Yeah.
How clinic is going to go, how my training is going to go, how my kids are going to be. I make up the whole thing.
Brilliant.
And then I decide what I'm going to bring in, like what I'm going to quote manifest.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in an esoteric way. I mean, okay, so I am going to manifest, one article and a big podcast or something like that.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be something crazy or, it's just fun. It's like a game, right? And then at the end of the day, I rewrite the day. So the things that didn't go as I had wished, I rewrite it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And does that sort of bring a closure to your day? And you're like, it's all part of it, right? It's that you think that reminds me of Richard Wiseman and his as if principle. You have to, the way that you either your thoughts control your behavior, or actually your behavior can control your thoughts. So it's sort of like that whole mindset.
I'm very on top of my thoughts. I'm very aware of any kind of negative thinking or any kind of uninteresting thoughts that I'm having. I'm very much on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is a very subtle undercurrent for individuals that takes them down.
Oh, completely. And people are so unaware of it as well. Absolutely unaware of it.
Yes.
Do you have any particular resources that have helped you sort of get on top of that, Gabrielle, that you could recommend for people?
Yes. Yes. The Handel group, I have used and coached with them for years. Mm-hmm. And then a very good friend of ours, Mark Divine, is phenomenal. Yes. He is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And both of those groups, so Mark Divine has an unbeatable mind, and I started listening to him years ago, and then we became friends. And in fact, that's how I met my husband, my now husband.
Amazing.
Yep. He is a phenomenal resource.
Okay, thank you. I've definitely seen Mark Divine's name in podcasts, and I've seen this book as well. That sounds great. And in terms of your training, you resistance
4 days a week.
Yeah,
I do. I always do I do resistance training 3 or 4 days a week, depending. Right now, I'm on the lower body kick.
Yeah.
Post pregnancy, just having a baby 6 months ago, I was doing a lot of kettlebells. Now I'm doing more compound movements, going towards more squats and heavier lifting. Trying to do a little heavier lifting.
Nice.
Deadlifts, sumo squats. Things of that nature.
Yeah.
And then cardio, I'll throw that in. Tomorrow I'll probably do some interval training.
Yeah.
2 days a week of interval training in the morning.
Yeah. Nice. And diet for you, Gabrielle, what sort of dietary pattern do you follow?
Typically, it's interesting. Typically, it's more carnivore-ish or carnivore-esque, where it's high protein, low carb. I have recently switched that within the last month, just to see. And I've been doing more carbohydrates, much higher carbohydrates and lower protein.
Yeah.
Just for 4 weeks, just to see how I feel.
And so far?
And that's with mostly fruits and I feel great.
Yeah.
I mean, I've lost lean muscle mass and I've lost overall weight, but it's a nice change.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always good to sort of change things up and note how you feel. It's that little bit of the sort of the art of nutrition again coming in, right? And sort of seeing,
absolutely.
And experiencing it yourself. Gabrielle, and any supplements that you might normally take?
Yes, I'm using a hair formula.
Lovely.
Postpartum, I had quite a bit of postpartum hair loss. I am using a hair formula, obviously fish oil. Mm-hmm. I try to do what has been pretty well researched and is effective. Yeah. So fish oil, vitamin D, I'll use some glutathione.
Nice.
What else? Right now, that's about it. And then I cycle through it.
Yeah.
So I cycle through it. Yeah. Right now, it's like a light month.
Yeah.
And then next month will be something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm always consistent about vitamin D, fish oil. oftentimes I'll take a multi.
Yeah.
And glutathione I tend to be pretty consistent with.
Yeah. Well, you have such a busy sort of life and, home clinic and writing a book and all the rest of it that probably doesn't hurt to do the multivitamin and, in addition to all those other things.
And caffeine and lots of caffeine.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually going to ask about your...
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. In the form of coffee. Yeah.
So I do like coffee, and I also use something called, it's called Sun Up green coffee. And I really, really like this. And I found it when I was actually a couple years ago when I was really, really lean and looking to suppress appetite and lose weight.
Yeah.
And when I say lose weight, keep muscle. This company is amazing. So it's called Sun Up Green Coffee, and it's a raw coffee.
Oh, amazing.
And so it has chlorogenic acid in it. It has polyphenols in it. So it's different than a roasted black coffee.
Yeah. And what does it taste like?
Tea. It's kind of like tea. It's a little bitter.
Yeah.
But you can put stuff in it. It's a really great product.
Okay.
It's a fantastic product. Yeah.
Nice. Well,
and it's the only one on the market. It's the only one on the market.
Oh, amazing. It's probably...
They're the only ones that I've ever seen a raw green coffee. Think about that.
Yeah. Cool. Gabrielle, thank you so much for your time today. It's so funny because of course I had multiple questions down here about protein and a couple on that health leadership stuff. But this conversation I found it really insightful because, of course, we can absolutely go to your YouTube channel, go to your Instagram and find all of that stuff around protein, longevity.
And I'll come back on. If you want to do a protein talk, I'll come back on and we'll do it. I am just so grateful. This is one of the only conversations that I've been able to talk freely about some of the other things that are of interest to me. So this is probably one of my favorite podcasts. And I really appreciate you asking these questions and kind of going with it. And I'm, of course, happy to come back and talk about protein because obviously we know protein is the most important macronutrient. But there are other important domains to health and wellness.
There really are. And I think, they're often overlooked because we're looking for that one shiny little thing, that magic pill that's going to sort of, bring us everything that we want. Whereas within ourselves, I suppose, in order to, find that healthy elixir.
Yes.
Gabrielle, thank you. And obviously, so can you tell us your Instagram handle? I'm obviously going to put all this in the show notes.
Sure. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Lyon. And then my website is drgabriellelyon.com. My YouTube. I had a really great conversation about fat loss and energy balance just recently with Dawn.
Awesome.
I will be launching some kind of a membership, quote, /mentorship.
Brilliant.
At some point in the future. And of course, they can sign up for my newsletter. And if they would like to be a patient, they can apply to be a patient.
That's amazing. And you have so much free resource on your website. I highly recommend people go check it out. It is amazing. Gabrielle, thank you. You enjoy your dinner and the rest of your evening. And
thank you.
I really appreciate your time.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty, I hope you guys enjoyed that, and you can find Dr. Lyon over on Instagram and at her website drgabriellelyon.com, and we will put links to her contact information in the show notes as well. And next week on the podcast, I had a great conversation with Matt Carpenter, who is a researcher in keto and low carb nutrition, and we talk all about his research with athletes and some of the things which he is finding out in his qualitative interviews that he is conducting with his athletes. But we go into the science, we go into the application, and we also go into the experience. So it is an awesome conversation. That is next week on Mikkipedia. Until that time, you can catch me on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, over on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, or on my website, Mikkiwilliden.com, where you can sign up to any one of my meal plans, including the Monday's Matter, which I mentioned earlier, book a one-on-one consultation with me, or sign up to Recipe Portal Access, which gives you access to over 650 recipes which are regularly updated. You get my weekly email, you get the opportunity to pick my brain on anything nutrition related specific to you, and you also get access to the Facebook page for members where we conduct Q&As and do member only Facebook Lives. Alright team, you enjoy the rest of your week and look forward to catching up with you next week. See you later.